there was nothing left out there except the orchestra pit. The stage had burned away and the wooden bleachers had been turned over, rotting, and they had full-grown trees that were growing where the audience once sat.
Because of the lease we had with the city, we had to produce a show once every 2 or 3 years. And if we didn't, then we lost the property.
One of the things about this theater company is the fact that it did rise from the ashes, because they were 1 year away from having the land revert
I
back
had
to the
asked
city.
Florence Birchall, we would meet on occasion when we were out to tent at the lake. And during the intermission, Florence and I would walk out to the top of the Muni and look over there, and there's all these trees and everything. And I can still remember us, both of us saying, why don't they? It was always, Florence is on the board, she's also saying, why don't they? And then later on she had said, the trustees who kept things alive were just plain tired. And that was
He
getting
came
close.
home one night and said, I think they is me. And he was right.
So we had to do something. So they decided to do a show on the outside, an outdoor theater. And we chose Douglas Park because they had a bandstand with the stage. I was chosen for director of Bye Bye Birdie. And when you stop to think, it was a lot to do, because if the show had flopped, then we'd lost everything. And the idea was, in that way, if the public came to the shows, we gave only 2 performances, then we would go back to Muni and rebuild it. If the public didn't come, then we'd give the property back to the city. The public responded. We had full houses both nights, so we were very pleased in that score.
And as president, I had recruited Bob Lubin to raise the funds to rebuild Muni in 1965. And he called me up and he says, we've got problems. And I said, what's that? And he says, meet me for lunch. So we met for lunch, and he said, I've been to a number of businesses, and they said they had lost money with donations to Muni 1 that had folded. And then there was a university there for 2 years, and they had made contributions and lost money there, followed by an organization known as Tent at the Lake, where they did theater in the round in the parking lot. And in the middle of the second season, they disappeared. And Bob said, the business managers are saying, we've lost enough money. Well, this happened to be at the time when I was writing the first bylaws, and then suddenly this inspiration from somewhere. And I said, Bob, tell the businesses that we are in the process of writing the new bylaws. And what we're putting in the bylaws is that Muni will not buy anything that we can't pay cash for it. Now, if we charge it, that's fine, but we have to have the money to pay for it when the bill comes in at the end of the month. And over the years, that's exactly what's happened, and that's probably the reason that Muni is now worth perhaps $1 million plus and no debt, because we were able to pay our way as we went along.
They learned their lesson well of what not to do based on what happened with the original Muni. And so the counsel that was received from that experience really was invaluable in setting this up in the proper way and having the appropriate bylaws and guidelines of what not to do as well as what to do.
So, I mean, that's what makes it worthwhile.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not just what we've done, but it's what so many other people have done. And it builds on itself. And that's one of the key things I think is very important.
It was the most interesting thing during rehearsals. I had not been out to the site, so my wife and I decided we would drive out and just see what the place was like. And we got out there, and it was weeds up to our knees, and they were building the stage. All they had, they didn't even have the floor on yet. They just had the, the beginnings of it. So that was my first exposure to the Muni. Weeds everywhere.
The first, well, I was in shows before I saw shows. I heard about the Muni, and as a matter of fact, I heard that this girl I went to school with had a leading role in it. And I thought, I could do that. I could probably do that better than she did. I didn't see her. She was probably wonderful. Okay, so the next year I auditioned and I got into the chorus of 2 plays. I was in the chorus of Music Man and South Pacific.
Well, the next year, when they went to the lake, they did Music Man and I don't remember the second show, not South Pacific, and I was in Music Man South Pacific. I was in my dance class with Mildred Caskey, and she said, "Oh, by the way, you're going to be in Music Man." And I said, "Oh, but Miss Caskey, I'll have to ask my mother." "Oh, it's all cleared." And so we just started, and I was in Music Man, and then I auditioned for South Pacific, and I danced in both of those. So
The first show I ever saw was in, I think, 1965, and that was My Fair Lady with George Dirksen, Fred Wassel, and Tom Woods. And I wasn't there in actual capacity as an audience member. I was a Boy Scout, and in those days, Muni needing stage help would take it wherever they could get it. And they asked our Boy Scout group if we could send some kids over to help move sets while I was sitting in the wings backstage watching the show on stage. I'd never seen a show out there before. When the lights, when the lights were up, we were sitting there. But in the meantime, some stage guy would come over and say to me, he'd say, "All right, now, when the lights go down, we're going to take this, we're going to move it out, and I'll show you where to set it down." I go, "Okay," and then next thing you know, "All right, here we go." The lights go down, we'd run out there and set it down, then go sit down. And I'd watch the show, but had my neckerchief on with my slide and my knee socks with the tassels, the whole Boy Scout uniform thing. So that was my first experience ever being out there. And I never did ever see it from the out front. I had no idea what was around the other side of the Louvre, but sitting there in the wings was my first moment.
Camelot, and I got to hold a spear. It was wonderful.
I do remember my first night at the Muni and watching a rehearsal of the show that was coming up, and that was Kiss Me Kate. And if I recall, Brush Up Your Shakespeare was the number that I was watching when I walked down to the site. Betty Ward, I believe Tom Shrewsbury, and a man by the name of Lansing Darling, they were rehearsing. And another person sort of darted past me as I was walking down, running, real long legs, Bob McAllister. And I was so impressed with the whole thing that first time down.
My very, very first Muni experience, my first memory of Muni was going to see Sound of Music in like 1972. My maternal grandfather was dying in the hospital, and my dad took us 3 girls to go see Sound of Music, and his cousin Don Edwards played Max. So that's my earliest memory of Muni.
My first show that I was in was 1976, Bye Bye Birdie.
That was before my time.
Yeah, that was before you. Then 1980,
Yes.
South
A
Pacific.
date which will remain infamous.
Yeah, that's the show we met in.
Yeah. Because at the end of the show, Luther has one line with one nurse. He's trying another scam. And this nurse sees right through him and blows him off completely. And that nurse was just the cutest little nurse.
My first Muni show that I was in was in 1978, was Sweet Charity, and met some lifelong friends, Doug Hahn, Cinda Reitzman, that was also her first show. Of course, Georgia Dirksen played Charity, and she did a great job. Phil Funkenbush was in the show.
The first summer I did Muni was 1981. And I was in the 3rd show that summer, so I saw the first 2 shows. No, I saw the first show before. The first show that summer was Camelot, and Lee, at the time, Steiner Crane, directed the show. She had horses coming up to the side of the stage. It was the most splendid thing I had ever seen in terms of anything like community theater. And I was in the third show that summer, which was Oklahoma. It was directed by an amazing woman by the name of Betty Ward.
The first show that I saw, it might have been Peter Pan, the first time they did it. That would have been 84. I do remember that. That was 84. No, I take it back. I think it was Oliver, because Matt Goulet, who was in my class at the time at Ursuline, and he and I did a lot of theater at school, and he was doing this thing called Muni. I'm like, okay, so I wanted to go see him, and that was great, and it was a lot of fun.
Well, I actually never saw a show at the Muni until I was in a show at the Muni. My parents heard about auditions, and it was the year I was old enough to qualify for auditions, and of course, as is often the case, the kids' show was first. So the first time any member of my family set foot on the Muni grounds was for rehearsals at the site for that first show I was in, which was The King and I in 1983. And I have kept every Muni program from every show I have seen since that time.
It was the summer after I moved here, 1992. I saw Man of La Mancha, and I began working as a dresser and sewings for the next show, which was Dreamgirls. And I ended up being a dresser in the next two shows as well. And the following summer, I was hooked up with Phyllis Williams, and I was co-designer with her, and the rest is history.
My first Muni experience was 1998. It was Annie Warbucks. Well, it was Annie. And the reason it was Annie was because my sister was in the orchestra pit. She was the accompanist, and I was 15 at the time. And she decided to have me go one night with her, and they needed more people on set crew. So I joined, and I've been there ever since.
Well, growing up, we always parked in the house right behind. My dad was friends with the people that live right behind the Muni, so I always saw him. I always had a quick glance of what was going on backstage, and so I was like, wow, that's really different. And then my first experience, I'm walking in backstage at Muni, and I'm just like, I had no clue where to go. And then finally, I was introduced to Dennis O'Brien and Daniel Bond, and it's just gone there. It was very overwhelming first time I stepped backstage at Muni to do work. I remember calling my mom that night and being like, because Ragtime, the beautiful score and everything, but I remember calling, like, this show is so good. And I was just so excited to actually be a part of it. It was really something else when I finally became part of the Muni, and knowing that what the people see and the quality that they're seeing out front, I'm in a way helping with.
It was everything for me. When I first started at Muni, the first two shows, all of my friends had gone away to college, and I didn't find out until I wanted to go to college that my parents weren't going to send me. And I was like, oh. So here I was at home, and I got a job, and I was kind of lost. And Muni became the place for me where I was found. I made friends. I grew in the knowledge I had of theater. I became pretty good, actually. So that's what Muni was for me. It was my sanctuary.
I was from Riverton, small town outside of Springfield, and I didn't know any other kids who were as into this kind of thing as I was. And so that was just the beginning of starting to meet other kids who were like me and who, instead of playing on a sports league all summer, wanted to do this all summer. The electronic ways of communicating now, I watch these kids that I've done Muni with these days connect with each other on Facebook and connect with me. And when I lived in Riverton in the early and mid 80s, I felt like Springfield was a long distance phone call. And one show was over, and I really and truly felt like, oh my goodness, I was not going to see those people again until maybe next summer.
One of the big moments is when they dedicated that building to my mom. That was such a funny day. That was the craziest day because my dad said, well, I think I'll go to the opening of the season. And my mom didn't think too much of that. We were able to pull that off. Well, that morning, and I got off work, and she says, I just don't think I'm going to get dressed up. My mother always got dressed up. She picked that day not to get dressed up. So I went out and bought a whole new outfit and got my hair done. Now see, I'm going to be dressed up. You have to get dressed up. I just think I'll wear old pants. Why did you pick that day of all the days of the year to wear old pants? So I got her dressed up. And everything was going to be okay. And then she tells me the night before, I'm going out to the site because Channel 20 is going to interview me about the new building. So, crack of dawn, 6 o'clock. Dennis, my mom's going to the site. If she goes back by the building, she's going to see her name on it. And the whole thing is going to be ruined. So I had him on the phone at 6 o'clock, got him out of bed, and he called me back. Let me just stand up first. And so he says, we got to think of something. I said, well, you got to think of something fast because she's going to see her name and the whole thing is going to be ruined. So out he went, and he, I don't know what he did, but he intercepted him and made him stay at the top of the hill. So she didn't see that. And then we get out to the site, and we go, and she goes, I don't think I'm going to go up on the stage when they dedicate the building. I'm like, what do you mean? She says, I just think I'll stay here. I don't know why she... So I had to drag her backstage, drag her on the stage. It was incredible. But anyway, that was a really proud moment. Because I have a picture of her clapping because she has no idea that she's clapping for herself. She didn't even know.
When the old concession stand was still there was always one single white plastic chair outside the side door, and it's always where Florence would sit. I can't remember a time that I showed up at that site that she was not sitting in that chair. Before and after the show, I would see her, and I would talk to her every night. And to this day, although even the concession stand isn't there, I walk past where it even was, and I still get a tug when I think about her sitting there every night watching over us.
The Mac take on the Muni family. First and foremost, there are so many, the diversity, and I'm not talking, I mean, there's socioeconomic diversity, and obviously a whole lot of gender diversity. There's an awful lot of women involved in theater, but an awful lot of guys too, which is good. But the professional diversity, the cultural diversity that's involved in the Muni is that's probably the greatest part. If you sit around in here, you're in a production and you look, when I've directed or been on staffs, and you kind of look, even in casting, you look to your left and right, you have business people and lawyers and people that are retired and bankers and accountants and nurses and people that work at churches, and it's just phenomenal. To me, I enjoy meeting, oftentimes theater can stagnate. You have all these people around you and you're like, all we ever do is talk about theater, and don't talk about theater, let's talk about something else. But something that's unique to the Muni, from my perspective, is that the friendships I've built may have started at the Muni. Their common starting point has something revolves around the Muni or something like that, but the Muni provided the foundation for those relationships to grow and become something more than they were. And I think it certainly provides for lack of a better term, it provides the foundation for relationships to kind of continue after that.
And that's the thing, is that we're not getting paid. My performance might affect me, in the smallest, going forward. But now it's about having a really great show, and along the way, having fun. And so I think that my joy of doing a show is creating those relationships and kind of, creating the fun and having, little get-togethers right after the show, or little get-togethers every night after rehearsal. I mean, I can't tell you how many shows where I've been out till 2 in the morning doing, sitting at Denny's with a whole bunch of people from the show every night of the week, in high school and college when I didn't have to go to work the next morning, and still now, even when I do have to go to work. But I think that is probably the most enticing thing about the entire process for me, is having people that, my best friends are from Muni. My best friends I met at Muni. And so that part has been extremely important to my life. So I can't say that there's much more. I mean, there's a lot of joy of seeing, your art come together and seeing something beautiful on stage and having people escape and having people come up and go, oh, I just really love that experience. But that's a completely different, emotion. And I think this one, the friendships are the most important for me.
Much more important, though, than the rules and the politics is the desire that is shared among the thousands of people that I've known doing this to simply tell a story and to tell it really well. So night after night in the summer, you go out there and you see this remarkable group of people, and it's very touching to be considered part of that tell the story night after night.
There's something about outdoor theater that no other space gets. I don't know what it is, whether it's the open air or, I don't know. I've never had, I have a feeling when I perform at Muni like I have no other place.
And then we say, why do we do this outdoor theater when it's so hot, know? But we keep doing it. There's something about, it's a communal aspect too. It's more than just going into a dark theater somewhere. It's a picnic, It's a celebration. It's supporting everybody, having a good time, and summertime, festive. There's something about the outdoor theater, and the Greeks back thousands of years ago. So there's something about it.
There is a real deep talent pool, and it is thanks to this organization and other organizations in this town that help develop that. And not only develop it in young people, as well as somebody who discovers it later in life, but attracts people who maybe could and should leave town for loftier pursuits of a creative profession of some sorts. What we've got here is really, really unique for the size community that we have, and it has kept a lot of people who have decided that, I don't want to live that life. I want to live in a house and have a cat and be able to afford my life and be able to have that unique experience of so many people who love me coming to see every performance that I ever give. And I have had friends from out of town, college theater friends of mine, just this past summer. One was down from Chicago, and wow, that conversation after he saw the Muni show was, oh, I get it now. You talked about this place when you got to college, and I had this idea of what community theater was, because in my town, community theater was like not as good as the high school theater. And now that I've been to Springfield, now I get it. I see what's going on here.
You just see people grow up and well, when I say grow up, just reach adultery, but that's not too far. But they come and you see people mature and grow, and they're offering so much, and the arts gives people a chance to express themselves well in ways that other things don't.
It will always have that special place in my heart. I grew up there. I became an old woman there. Well, it is just, it's the place that defines me for who and what I am. And I loved it.
Well, we've known many, many young people, some of whom have gone on to make a professional career out of theater, and we are so incredibly proud of them. But even those folks who simply enjoy it as an avocation, how it has enriched their lives and enriched our lives is just remarkable and very heartwarming. So, you know, if we do nothing else in this life, we had the joy of having watched that over all these years.